We regret to inform you that your position has been eliminated. Those words hung in the air of the sterile conference room like toxic gas. I remember staring at the HR director's mouth as she continued speaking, her lips moving in slow motion, while a high-pitched ringing filled my ears. After 15 years of loyal service to Meridian Financial, just like that, gone. The severance package folder sat heavy in my hands. 15 years reduced to a manila envelope and a corporate-approved speech about restructuring and market conditions. I was 40 years old, divorced, with a mortgage that wouldn't pay itself. Susan, the HR director, Melissa, said, leaning forward with practiced sympathy, "This isn't a reflection on your performance. Everyone speaks highly of you. It's just business. Just business." The corporate guillotine that had claimed so many of my colleagues over the years had finally found my neck. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by the severance papers, a half-empty bottle of Cabernet keeping me company. The house was too quiet, too empty. My daughter was at college across the country, and I'd been alone since David left 3 years ago. The golden retriever I'd rescued last year, Max, nudged my hand with his nose, sensing my distress. "What now, Max?" I whispered, scratching behind his ears. "What the hell do I do now?" The thought that had been simmering in the back of my mind for years bubbled to the surface. A dream I'd never had the courage to pursue. Opening my own café. Not just any café, but a place that combined my passion for baking with my love of books. A literary café where people could connect, read, and indulge in homemade pastries that weren't mass-produced or pumped full of preservatives. I'd always been the one bringing homemade treats to office potlucks, the one friends called for birthday cake recipes, the woman who stress-baked during difficult times and ended up with enough cookies to feed an army. "It's just a hobby, Susan," David used to say dismissively. "A cute little hobby." My phone buzzed. A text from my brother, Michael. "Heard the news. That's rough. Job market's tight for people our age. Let me know if you need help with the mortgage." I took another sip of wine, feeling a flash of irritation. Michael had always been the successful sibling, the one with the thriving dental practice, the perfect marriage, the kids who were athletic and popular. I was the reliable one, the safe one, the one who stayed in her lane. The wine gave me courage. I called him back. "Hey, Mike, thanks for checking in." "No problem. So what's the plan? Polish up the resume?" I took a deep breath. "Actually, I'm thinking of opening my own business. A literary cafe. You know, books, coffee, my baking." The silence that followed was brief but telling. "Susan," he said, his voice taking on that big brother tone I'd grown to detest, "be realistic. Starting a business at 40? In this economy? The failure rate for restaurants is something like 90% in the first year. And you've got no experience. I've been baking my entire life. As a hobby, sure, but running a business is different. You need capital, business sense, marketing knowledge. Look, I'm not trying to burst your bubble, but maybe this is an opportunity to find something stable, something with benefits. You're not getting any younger, and—" "Thanks for the vote of confidence." I cut him off, my voice sharper than intended. "I'm just being practical, Sue. Someone has to." The next day, I met my best friend Diane for lunch. Diane had been my colleague at Meridian before moving to a competitor 2 years ago. She dodged the layoff bullet, and while I was genuinely happy for her, a small part of me couldn't help but feel bitter about the contrast in our circumstances. "So," she said, after appropriate expressions of outrage about my layoff, "what's the plan?" I stirred my iced tea nervously. "I'm thinking of opening a cafe." Diane's perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up. "A cafe, like, with food and stuff?" "A literary cafe," I clarified. "Books, coffee, pastries. I've been dreaming about it for years." Diane set down her fork and gave me that look, the one that said she was about to deliver hard truths for my own good. "Susan, honey, I love you. But isn't that a young person's game? All those trendy cafes are run by 20-somethings with trust funds and Instagram influencer looks. The hours are brutal, and the profit margins are razor thin. My stomach clenched. I've done my research. There's nothing like what I'm envisioning in our area. And my baking. Your baking is amazing for friends and family, sure, she interjected. But scaling up to commercial levels? That's different. And the financial risk. You just lost your job. Shouldn't you be, I don't know, tightening your belt? Playing it safe? Playing it safe. The story of my life. I have my severance, I said defensively. And some savings. Which you'll need if you can't find another job quickly, she countered. Look, I'm not saying don't follow your dreams. I'm just saying maybe the timing isn't great. Wait until you're back on your feet. Maybe start small, sell at farmers markets or something, shows. I nodded, pretending to consider her advice, while inwardly my resolve hardened. Diane meant well, but she'd always been risk-averse. Her idea of adventure was buying shoes that weren't on sale. That weekend, I visited my daughter, Emma, at college. We hadn't seen each other in months, and the change in her always startled me. Each time she seemed more adult, more her own person. At 20, she was already more confident than I'd ever been. Over dinner at her favorite campus pizza place, I broke the news about the layoff. Those corporate jerks, she said, her face flushing with indignation. After everything you've done for them. I smiled at her loyalty. It's okay, sweetie. I'm actually thinking it might be an opportunity. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. What kind of opportunity? I'm considering opening that cafe I've talked about. The literary-themed one with my baking. Emma's face lit up. Mom, that would be amazing. Your lemon lavender scones alone would make you a millionaire. Her enthusiasm was like a balm. Finally, someone who didn't immediately tell me all the ways I would fail. You really think so? Absolutely. Remember when you made those for Parents' Weekend? My roommate's mom asked for the recipe 3 times. I felt a warmth spreading through my chest. Well, your uncle and Diane seem to think I'm having a midlife crisis. Emma rolled her eyes. Uncle Mike thinks anyone who doesn't have a 401k and a 5-year plan is irresponsible. And Diane, Mom, I love her. But when was the last time Diane did anything spontaneous? It's not exactly spontaneous, I admitted. I've been thinking about this for years. Then what are you waiting for? Emma leaned forward, her eyes intense. Mom, you've spent your whole life playing by other people's rules, making sure everyone else was taken care of. Maybe it's time you did something for yourself. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. When had my daughter become so wise? I'm scared, I confessed quietly. What if they're right? What if I fail? Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. What if you don't? And even if it doesn't work out exactly as planned, at least you'll know you tried. Isn't that better than wondering what if forever? The next week was a whirlwind. I threw myself into research, reading books on small business management, attending a local seminar for entrepreneurs, and scouting potential locations. I created a detailed business plan, calculating startup costs, projected revenue, and break-even points. I also began testing recipes, adjusting them for larger batches. My kitchen looked like a flour bomb had detonated, but the results were promising. I hosted an impromptu tasting party with neighbors and friends who weren't already skeptical of my plan. These cinnamon rolls are insane, my neighbor Pete said, reaching for his third. I'd pay good money for these. The coffee's perfect too, his wife added. Strong but not bitter. Their encouragement fueled me, but the real test came when I approached the bank for a business loan. I'd prepared meticulously, rehearsing my pitch until I could recite it in my sleep. The loan officer, a man younger than me by at least a decade, reviewed my business plan with an expression that hovered between skepticism and pity. Miss Reynolds, he said, leaning back in his chair, while your enthusiasm is commendable, the numbers here are concerning. You're proposing to enter a highly saturated market with no prior business experience at an age where At an age where what, exactly? I interrupted, feeling heat rise to my face. He had the decency to look embarrassed. Where career transitions can be challenging, he finished diplomatically. Look, the failure rate for new restaurants and cafes is extremely high. Your personal financial situation, following your recent unemployment, makes you a significant risk. I'm sorry, but we can't approve this loan. I walked out of the bank feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Was this a sign? Maybe everyone was right. Maybe I was being ridiculous. A middle-aged woman having some sort of breakdown after losing her job. As I sat in my car, I scrolled through my phone, looking at the pictures I'd taken of potential locations. There was one in particular, a former bookstore with large windows and original hardwood floors, that had captured my imagination. I could already see the cafe tables, the bookshelves, the display case filled with my creations. Before I could talk myself out of it, I called the realtor. Hi, this is Susan Reynolds. I'm interested in the Commercial Street property. Yes, the old bookstore. I'd like to make an offer. I didn't tell anyone what I'd done. Not at first. Instead, I liquidated a significant portion of my retirement fund, accepting the penalty with a grimace, and secured a smaller loan from a credit union that seemed more open to my vision. I signed a lease on the Commercial Street property, hired a contractor for renovations, and began the process of obtaining permits. Only when the lease was signed did I share the news. The reactions were predictably mixed. Michael was horrified. You did what with your retirement fund? Susan, have you lost your mind? What if this fails? You'll have nothing. My parents, concerned but trying to be supportive. Well, it's your money, dear, and you always were a wonderful baker. Diane, with forced enthusiasm. Wow, you're really doing it. That's brave. Only Emma was unreservedly excited. She immediately offered to help with the cafe's social media presence and came home for a weekend to help me choose paint colors and furniture. The renovation process was a nightmare of delays, unexpected expenses, and bureaucratic red tape. Each new obstacle seemed to confirm everyone's doubts. The plumbing needed a complete overhaul. The health department required expensive ventilation upgrades. The contractor found asbestos that needed professional removal. My savings dwindled at an alarming rate. I started having panic attacks in the middle of the night, waking up gasping for air, convinced I was making a catastrophic mistake. 3 months in, with the opening still weeks away and my bank account approaching dangerously low levels, I received a call from Michael. How's the cafe coming along? He asked, his tone deliberately casual. Fine, I lied. Everything's on track. Good, good, he said. Listen, Sue, I've been thinking. This business venture, it's a big risk, and I hate seeing you drain your savings like this. I braced myself for another lecture. So, he continued, Sarah and I were talking, and we'd like to offer you a loan, just to help with the final push. No interest. Pay us back when the cafe is successful. I nearly dropped the phone. You want to invest? Well, I wouldn't call it an investment exactly. It's family helping family. I still think this is risky as hell, but you're committed. And you're my sister, so let us help. Tears streamed down my face as I accepted his offer. It wasn't just the money, though that was desperately needed. It was the acknowledgement, however reluctant, that he believed I might succeed. Opening day of Chapterverse Cafe arrived with both fanfare and terror. I'd spent the previous week in a frenzy of preparation, baking from dawn until midnight, training the 2 baristas I'd hired, both college students with flexible schedules, and obsessively checking and rechecking every detail. Emma had created social media accounts for the cafe and had been posting teasers for weeks. She'd also designed flyers that she'd distributed around the college campus. Michael and Sarah had surprised me by arranging for a small write-up in the local newspaper's business section. Still, as I unlocked the doors at 7 a.m., I was prepared for the possibility that no one would come. At 7:05, my first customer walked in. An elderly gentleman who examined the bookshelves with interest before ordering a black coffee and a blueberry muffin. Delicious, he pronounced after his first bite. Reminds me of the ones my wife used to make. I'll be back tomorrow. By 8:30, there was a small line at the counter. By noon, every table was filled. Emma's college friends came in droves, but there were others too, neighbors, curious locals, even a few former colleagues from Meridian who'd heard about my midlife career change. One of those colleagues was Robert, the accounting department head, who'd always treated me with condescending politeness. He surveyed the cafe with obvious surprise. "Susan, this is unexpected," he said, as if he'd stumbled upon me performing brain surgery. "Quite charming, actually. Who would have thought you had this in you?" I smiled tightly. "Coffee? We have an excellent dark roast." By closing time, we'd sold out of nearly everything. My feet were killing me, my back was screaming in protest, and I'd never been happier in my life. The first year was the hardest. Despite the successful opening, there were slow days that left me in a cold sweat, wondering if this was the beginning of the end. There were equipment failures, supplier issues, and the constant grinding work of running a business with minimal staff. I learned to fix the espresso machine myself after the third time it broke down. I developed systems for inventory management that maximized freshness while minimizing waste. I switched coffee suppliers twice before finding one that delivered consistent quality. So, slowly, carefully, I built a loyal customer base. The literary theme resonated with local book clubs, who began hosting their meetings at the cafe. Emma's college connections brought in the younger crowd. And my baking, which I refreshed seasonally, became something of a local sensation. By the end of the first year, I was breaking even. By the end of the second, I was turning a modest profit and had hired 2 more employees. Throughout it all, the doubt and criticism from others never completely disappeared. There were always those who expected me to fail, who watched with barely concealed anticipation for the going out of business signs to appear in the windows. Diane visited occasionally, always with the same question: "How's business? Hanging in there?" The surprise in her voice when I reported good news never diminished. Michael, to his credit, became a genuine supporter after seeing my dedication and modest success. He and Sarah became regular customers, bringing friends and colleagues whenever they could. It was during the third year that everything changed. A food blogger with a significant following stumbled upon Chapter Verse while visiting relatives in town. She wrote a glowing review, praising the perfectly executed pastries that rival anything in major metropolitan areas, and the charming literary ambience that makes you want to linger all day. The post went viral in foodie circles. Suddenly, we had visitors driving from 2 states away to try our baked goods. Local media picked up the story: the middle-aged corporate cast-off who reinvented herself as a successful cafe owner. I hired more staff. I expanded the menu. I stayed true to my vision, but adapted where necessary. When customers repeatedly requested gluten-free options, I spent weeks perfecting recipes that didn't taste like cardboard. Then came the opportunity I never could have anticipated. A vacant storefront became available in the adjacent town, and the building owner, who happened to be a Chapterverse regular, approached me about opening a second location. The expansion was terrifying but exhilarating. I took the leap, leveraging the success of the original cafe to secure proper financing this time. The second location opened with lines around the block, the reputation of the first store creating built-in demand. It was a Wednesday afternoon, almost 3 years to the day from my layoff at Meridian, when they walked in. A group of my former colleagues, including Melissa from HR and several executives. They were in town for a regional conference and had heard about the must-visit cafe from the hotel concierge. They didn't recognize me at first. I'd changed, not just physically, though the stress weight I'd carried for years had melted away with physical work and purpose. There was a confidence in my posture now, an ease in my movements that hadn't existed when I'd been hunched over spreadsheets in a cubicle. It was Melissa who finally placed me, her eyes widening in recognition as I approached their table. Susan? Susan Reynolds? The conversation at the table halted as the others looked up, expressions morphing from confusion to shock. Welcome to Chapter Verse, I said, smiling genuinely. There was no need for pettiness or revenge. Success was vindication enough. This is your place? Asked Gordon, the CFO who had ultimately signed off on the layoffs. I had no idea. It's impressive. Thank you, I said simply. We've been hearing about this cafe all over town, Melissa added, looking around with new interest. People rave about the pastries. We're very fortunate, I acknowledged. We've built a wonderful community here. They ordered coffees and an assortment of pastries, their initial awkwardness giving way to effusive compliments as they tasted my creations. As I was about to return to the counter, Gordon called me back. Susan, we should talk. Meridian has been considering adding a cafe to the office complex. Employee satisfaction initiative. Maybe there's an opportunity for a partnership? I felt a momentary vertigo, a glimpse of an alternate universe where I'd remained in their orbit, grateful for any crumb of opportunity they deigned to throw my way. I appreciate the thought, Gordon, but we're actually in expansion mode right now. Opening our third location next month, in fact. My schedule is quite full. The look on his face, a mixture of surprise and something that might have been respect, was worth every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, every penny of my depleted retirement fund. Perhaps another time then, he said, his tone suggesting he wasn't used to being declined. Perhaps, I agreed, knowing there would never be another time. Enjoy your pastries. The lemon lavender scones are particularly popular. As I walked away, I heard one of them mutter, "Who would have thought? Susan Reynolds of all people." Who would have thought, indeed? Later that evening, after closing, I sat at one of the cafe tables with a cup of tea, savoring the quiet after a busy day. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Just saw the mock-ups for the third location signage. Looks amazing. So proud of you, Mom. You showed them all. I smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought me here. The doubt, both external and internal, the fear, the countless moments when giving up had seemed like the most rational choice. And yet, here I was, owner of a thriving business, employer, creator. My phone buzzed again. A text from Diane. Hey, heard your cafe got written up in the regional food magazine. Congrats. Listen, thinking of stopping by tomorrow. Any chance you could set aside one of those chocolate things with the sea salt? They're always sold out when I come. I texted back. Sorry, special orders only available for regular customers. Then added a winking emoji and, but I'll save you one. 10 a.m. good? Setting down my phone, I looked around at the space I'd created. The bookshelves lined with well-loved volumes, the comfortable chairs where people connected, relaxed, found moments of peace in busy days, the counter where my creations, born from passion rather than obligation, brought joy to strangers who became friends. It wasn't perfect. Running a business never is. There were still challenges, still days when I questioned my decisions, still moments when the responsibility felt overwhelming. But it was mine, my vision, my risk, my reward. As I locked up for the night, I remembered something my daughter had said during that pivotal dinner when everyone else was telling me all the reasons I would fail. What if you don't? What if you don't, indeed? If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Have you ever taken a major risk that others doubted? Or have you been held back by fear or others' expectations? Share your experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story of triumph or the dream you're still working toward. Remember, it's never too late to rewrite your own narrative. Until next time, this is Daily Life Stories, where every experience matters.